What is happening out there, Roto Scouts basketball fans? Welcome to a Thursday show, gang. Already messy. We just got news. Freddie VanVleet not going to play today, so that's fun. I decided this thing seems to be skewing high. Do I sound weird? Oh, I've also still got the sim up. I discovered this old tab on the sheet. This has been here the entire time, but I just dropped today's data into it, but I can't remember how the hell to make it work. This was one of the old sim boards. I just figured I would run it just for the hell of it, but I can't remember how to actually trigger the sim to work. So I gotta look back into that. But I just rediscovered that tab was even there. I was like, oh, what does sim mean? And I clicked on it. That's what cost me a couple minutes at the beginning of the show here. Yeah, we're going to just kind of talk around Freddie VanVleet being out. It would have cost us about 15 or so minutes to rerun the sim. So that's going to be a little bit of a pain in the neck to get going here. You can also see the ridiculousness that's already going on this slate. Just 5 games in play today. We've got our first 100%er of the season. I'm pretty sure we've seen a lot of high 90s and so on, but I do not think we've seen anybody actually land in 100% of our top 150 sim lineups. That's Jalen Williams with a Y on DraftKings, looking like an absolute monster today at 3,300. So definitely a spot to tee up for value. I don't know if that's one that you necessarily want to full lock, but the sim certainly likes that approach, and I think you definitely need absolutely tons and tons. And the ownership, I'll call out that this ran against, a little bit light, I think, across the board. But anyway, we're going to dig into all this stuff. We're going to go through the Vegas situations. First, we'll talk game environments. We'll talk player situations. But first, let me figure out where the hell my logo is. Everything's a little bit off today. Don't know why. Theme, branding, yada, yada, yada. There we go. Put that there. And my little name tag thing's gone too. I don't know why this keeps going away. Anyway, follow the @RotoScouts Twitter handle if you get a chance. It's also on Blue Sky. You don't have to worry about the digital B21. That's just my personal gripes and retweets kind of a handle. Jokes occasionally. Used to be a lot more fun in that space. Well, let's say hi to everybody. Cujo's here. Happy Thursday, pal. Andy, good to see you. Loser. Sorry. I shouldn't have tied that together that quickly. I was not calling Andy a loser. I was moving on to I'm a loser till I win the Millie, who is the next person in the chat. Apologies, Andy. Wasn't calling you a loser, buddy. But saying hi to I'm a loser till I win the Millie. Good to see you, pal. Mamba's here. Mama says, I know you played Gafford like I said yesterday. Cujo, easy money yesterday. Yeah, Gafford worked out. How about Keaton Wallace at the top of the board? Hopefully you got to a lot of him. I had him in, I only played 4 lineups. Had him in all 4. Had a bunch of Hawks across the board. Obviously, Bogdan didn't get there, but most of the other guys, at least reasonably worked out. And what did I end up in? One of the 4 lineups was, I think it topped out at like 19th on FanDuel in the big tournament. Ended up in the 50s somewhere, I want to say. So just little, handful of lineups can easily get there. And I felt like it was a good slate yesterday. I mean, we were all over things. Today, we'll see what happens. But for that messy 11-gamer that we had last night, I was really pleased with how all the results went. Wasn't all that much fun staying on top of all that stuff all night long, but definitely good outcomes. So hopefully you guys had some good results out there. Sounds like Mamba did. I would expect that as usual. But let's get into this. Let me sort here so you can, while I'm talking Vegas, you guys can peruse some of those top guys. Oh, I meant to mention this. For whatever reason, these 5 guys didn't go through the sim. The only one that would even reasonably potentially matter would be Time Lord. I've got him at 14 minutes. He went from out to questionable. He may or may not play. He's also 3,300. The fact that we've got Jalen Williams on the board at the same price and going into 100% of lineups suggests to me that we would come up with a 0 share of 14-minute Time Lord. Anyway, I'm going to wipe these guys out. Just because for whatever reason they didn't go through on DK, they come up with zeros anyway on FanDuel, so they are irrelevant. So that's your board. Let me pull up Vegas, talk ins and outs. Hit the like button as we get started. Also, if you're new, oh, you know what? I mentioned it. Just want to double check my... I knew it.
Do I sound a lot better now? Like, does it sound like a richer, full microphone sound? I think it was the freaking cat. I pulled the video up yesterday. I wanted to go back and check something that I had said yesterday, and I caught how tinny I sounded. And the cat, I think, changed the speaker when he's mashing on the keyboard here. It was going through the webcam speaker. No wonder. All right, should be back on the mic now. Sounds better? Sounds good? As long as it sounds good. As long as you can hear me. Much better. Good. Sounds like HD 8K. Mama says, thanks for the discussion on Onyeka. It led me to a much bigger win than anticipated. Nice. Always, dude. That's what we're here for. All right. Now that I've properly mic'd that swallow, let's get into this. And, of course, the Pinnacle board went away. Only one game posted right now. That's the Pacers at the Pistons. The Pistons are favored by 228-point total in that one. Not expecting Halliburton to play, but he's technically questionable. We'll see what happens there. Right now, he's in the projections. He's in the numbers because he's questionable. No news yet. Nesmith's also questionable. He's been out for a while. So some definite changes probably coming down the pike in that one. And then let me go back in time to the board that's in the spreadsheet. This is going to be a little bit old. You know what? They're not the best source in the world, but I'm just going to pull up the board over on Labs because I know they'll have it. They never come down. Even when everybody else is updating lines, which isn't necessarily great. All right, so, yeah, Pacers, Detroit. That one's targetable. Reasonably decent total. Definitely on the Pacers side, we're going to have some values. We're going to have our, TJ McConnells of the world picking up a little bit of additional potential upside. We're going to have the Nembhard play looking pretty decent. A couple of the other guys in that department, mix and match kind of minutes. We'll see how they come through the Sims. McConnell to me is interesting just given his point per minute rate, but the minutes are always lower than you would want in the low 20s these days. So we'll see what comes up in our results. Phoenix at Washington. It's got the star caliber guys from Phoenix looking pretty good. They are still, they don't have Nick Richards today. Okogie obviously shipped out of town. Nurk straight up out, so he's not going to be available. So we've got a little bit of a value crunch there. Bradley Beal is out, so that floats the Durant and Booker plays up to the top against a pretty terrible Washington team. Makes a ton of sense there. That's a 231.5 point total. Suns are favored by 11.5 on the road. Cavs and OKC, easily the game of the day. OKC favored by 2 at home. 233 total there. Obviously, again, we're getting 100% of Jalen with a Y because Hartenstein is out. We didn't have this situation earlier in the season when Hartenstein was out because Jalen was also out. So right now, $3,300 Jalen Williams looks like technically the best play of the year per the numbers so far. Per the numbers, nobody's going to come up higher than him than the results we got on him today. So absolute smash spot for him. And then some of the other guys from OKC I definitely think are worthwhile. On the Cleveland side, a lot of are who they are kind of situations, but a very good game. It's going to be competitive. There are going to be, some lockdown defenders on that OKC team, so that's a little bit problematic. But the top end pieces from Cleveland, just on a short slate by default, just looking kind of good. And we've got Houston, Sacramento. A funky logo. That's the Clippers logo, I guess. Did they change their logo and I just haven't seen it? Or is Fantasy Labs using something funky? When did the Clippers change their logo? Beginning of last year? This is literally like the first time I've noticed that. Because it's up on... Labs has it up there, and literally nobody else uses it. Anyway. So the Rockets and the Kings. 225-point total in that one. We obviously just lost Freddie Van Vliet. The Rockets favored by 2.5 on the road. We'll see whether or not that changes. Sacramento was coming up big time earlier for me. Just I really like the upside for minutes from that team for the starting five. They're like, I've been saying it for most of the year, they're like Knicks West in that they have a starting five that plays upper 30s minutes most of the time. So it's ideal to get to that team. It is kind of a grindy lockdown defensive Houston team, but 225-point total works on a 5-game slate today. And then we're definitely going to see some pieces float to the top now from the Houston side of things with no Fred VanVleet. That voids out 36, 37 minutes on the average, tons and tons of usage. So we're going to get some upside out of the remaining pieces for Houston here. And then that other game, the Clippers at the Blazers, 220.5-point total in that one. Clippers favored by 6.5 on the road. No Kawhi today. I don't know if anybody's really going to be super appealing. Do we have anybody from the Clippers coming up? Zubac. Zubac is always interesting. Powell, Jones, Harden. Everybody's coming up in FanDuel, pretty decent shares, mid-teens type shares on DraftKings, which is where I was thinking. So, different plays across sites. And this is looking like a pretty radically different slate across sites outside of how good Jalen Williams looks on both. But on FanDuel at 4,000, he's a different kind of play. He's not quite the absolute critical must-have value. He's still at a 6.74 value score on that slate. He is super critical to the FanDuel slate, but you can see the difference in 100% versus 82%. Still a absolute smash spot. After they moved to the new arena. Yeah, I had also forgotten that they had a new arena, to be quite honest. When they had the day, week or so ago, when they were both at home, and both those games got postponed, I was like, that tripped me up for a minute. I was like, how the hell? And then I realized that they had the new arena, and then they've played, I think, twice since then, both at home in the last week. But yeah, that was definitely something new to absorb. I literally don't think I've seen that logo before. It popped up and I was like, who the hell? Anyway. Yeah, Harden, Kid Kobe. Harden's always going to be at least playable given his per minute rates, but he's coming up a lot more on FanDuel. 8,800 on the FanDuel board versus 9,100 on DraftKings. Different kind of play, but he's playing at 127 per minute. They're going up against Portland, so it's kind of a pushover opponent. No reason not to consider some guys from the Clippers. It's just I was thinking in terms of like, was anybody floating up for like massive must-have value? And I was looking at it through the DK lens, and it's not quite there. But yeah, any of those guys is going to be at least reasonable. Talking about some ins and outs. So let me put a pending post show. Okay. Everybody will catch what that means. All right. Update's going to go up in a little bit after the show's over, but I'm popping that up onto the site now so that at least we're updated in the notes and people will know. So Fred VanVleet out. Terrence Mann is questionable. Robert Williams III got updated to questionable or upgraded to questionable. Joker's choking on something in the other room. Hey, you okay in there, dummy? What are you doing? It's like Cousin Eddie's dog Snot under the table in Christmas Vacation. He's just yakking on a bone. There, he got it up. Dog just pukes under the table. Tyrese Halliburton's questionable. Aaron Nesmith is questionable. So is Devin Carter. Outs, Isaiah Jackson, Ben Mathurin, James Wiseman, Jaden Ivey, Bradley Beal, Yusuf Nurkic, Nick Richards, Marvin Bagley, Sadiq Bey, Malcolm Brogdon, Isaiah Hartenstein, Chet Holmgren, AJ Mitchell, Danny Avdija doubtful, Donovan Klingen's out, Jeremy Grant is out, Matty Thybulle's out. So obviously Time Lord's presence would be somewhat interesting for Portland. But again, I don't think we're getting any kind of significant minutes, just the backup run at him. And that is it for right now. We've got now the Cats. Fortunately, the Cat I remember to lock down before every show. Otherwise, we'd have shows where he's just coming flying in from this direction. He loves being on the desk. I think I mentioned I accidentally addicted him to this screen as well. I started showing him just on a lark. I was just like, hey, you know what? I bet YouTube's got videos for cats. And they do. And it's all like little mice running around and birds. And the minute I pulled it up, he was like, and he was just engaged. And he thinks they're real and he's trying to find them behind the screen and everything. But now I can't get him to leave this space alone. That's why he's constantly mashing on the keyboard. So now I have to remember to move the keyboard because the cat, there's no way to get him to not want to be here anymore. So that was probably a bad idea. But it is fun. Anyway, let's sort by some DraftKings positions here, and we'll talk about some of these values. Again, board's going to be a little bit different, and a lot of it's going to center around Houston. So originally, none of these guys were really hitting all that much, but now we are losing this guy, which is going to result in not necessarily more minutes, although Jalen Green might pick up a minute or two here. It's going to result in more upside, more usage, more opportunity for those two guys pretty directly. And then we're going to see minutes uptick for probably both Aaron Holiday, Reed Shepherd down here. And then there's going to be some impact to the Cam Whitmores of the world. Şengün will still look good and probably picks up rate. I got to check what it looks like. But that one landed right as the show started. So going to be a little bit of a variance in here. But some of the top plays are going to remain, or most of the top plays are going to remain the top plays. Like Devin Booker. 62% on FanDuel, 67% on DraftKings. So again, the Phoenix side of that game is looking very, very juicy. Grayson Allen, 34% on FanDuel, 35% on DraftKings. Not to mention the Portland guys. Delano Banton, 32% FanDuel, 44% DraftKings. And Scoot, 93% FanDuel, 33% DraftKings. Those are major chunks of ownership for those top four players. Scoot is one of the most highly projected guys on both sites ownership-wise. Got him at 32 minutes. We saw him get a start, play 38-8 the other day, put up 54.8 on the FanDuel scale. He's playing at 0.93 for the season. Usage just under 22% across all situations, but has the opportunity to see more. So, love the upside. Price is right. 51 on FanDuel, 58 on DraftKings. We're above the value threshold on both sites, but we're way further clear of it on the FanDuel slate. That's why we get him 93%. Way, way above the field. But it's not like... yeah, I guess it is basically the same shade. I was going to say it's not quite as dark, but it is. Banton at 32% for 3,900. I think that's just a little bit artificially limited by those minutes. Played just 18.6 the other day. Averages just 15.7. I did push him up to 20. Again, a lot of missing bodies for Portland. This is all assuming Denny doesn't miraculously recover and get into the game. He's doubtful. But Banton's a 1.09 per minute player on FanDuel, 1.10 per minute on DraftKings. He's more important on DraftKings because he's only 3,000. Dead min price, anybody, you're going to just want them. That gives him a 6.9 value score. And he's not just anybody. I mean, in the minutes he does play, again, 1.10 is a significant fantasy producer. So getting that guy at the minimum, crucial. 6.90 value score. We're level with the field at 44. I do think it makes sense to take a position one way or another. So if you knock that down 35%, take a negative position on him, kick it up to 50 plus, take a positive position. Given the strength of the value and the power that you would get from combining that value with the Jalen Williams $3,300 value, I would probably take it up before taking it down. I think it is a very good spot. And he could play a couple more minutes than that. And for every minute he's out there, he's going to see a solid line upward in, expectation. Again, it's not like we're talking about a 0.7 per minute player. So I think that's a very interesting spot. Grayson Allen, not my favorite play on the board, or not my favorite player on the board, but I like the looks of the play. 34% on both sites, or 35% across sites. We are below the field on both. We're above our value threshold on both sites, though at worst, he's a very good spot filler. He's a 0.83, 0.86 guy. So again, that's where we come into the I don't love the player. I don't love the reliability. let alone, him as a person. 18.8 FanDuel points in 26-6 the other day. You get a lot of those letdowns. But right now, on a 5-gamer, that definitely fills lineup slots. Scoot on DraftKings for 58. Not as good a fit. 33%, a little bit below the field. I think that does make sense. And the top-end DK ownership today was right in that territory, Jalen included. And that's why I say I really think that this DraftKings sim ran against light ownership. Nothing I can do about it. I'm not the one projecting it. I'm using from a source that you guys are familiar with. And I've mentioned many times on the show without revealing it, or without revealing their numbers, I mean. But I think they're light. I really, really do. I've seen mention in other places that have it significantly higher, and I think they're correct. And the truth is probably somewhere between the 30, 35 and the 100% that we got. Definitely don't want less than that of them. But the top end on DraftKings right now is right in this range. So this, while being level, is actually a little bit above the field on the Banton play already. And then all these guys are essentially with the field-ish. Lou Dort, solid on DraftKings, 4,000. Not a bad price. He's just a 0.75 per minute guy. That's, again, always the issue with most of the mid-board OKC guys. You've got Dort right there at 0.75. You got Isaiah Joe down here at 0.82. Alex Caruso is at 0.89 this year, and the minutes are still a little bit fragile. We got him at 20 right now. The Cason Wallaces, the Aaron Wiggins of the world. Not one of those guys is a great per-minute player. They're all very good NBA players, and they all do their thing. Lou Dort, though, in this Cleveland matchup, going to see plenty of upside, plenty of minutes. There is the void from No Hartenstein. They're obviously not matching positions, but they're going to need Dort out there. 30% on DraftKings, I think that's fine level with the field. I think you could take more than that. He's a 5.79 value score on DK. On FanDuel, he's 4,700. He's at best a mix and match guy on FanDuel. A spot filler. I like Grayson Allen better on FanDuel, unfortunately. That said, if we're a little bit below the field at 34% on Grayson Allen for 46, and we're also a little bit below the field at 12.5% for 47, that does create a pivot point that's at least a little bit interesting to me. If I'm looking to bail out further from Grayson Allen, you can push the position on Lou Dort up, because that's not a completely dissimilar play. The rate is different. Grayson gets him a little bit on the rate. That's why he's got a little bit more meat on the bone for fewer minutes as far as the projection goes. But that's close enough, and the price is right to make that a pivot point. So if you took 10 percentage points out of your Grayson play, took him down to every 1 in 4, and you could push that up, you would probably gain ground to get enough of a position that's ahead of the field, and it's a gentle move slate-wise. It's only a 5-game slate. That's a reasonable position shift, I think. So Dort, as much as he doesn't look great on FanDuel, for that flexibility, I think he's at least on the board. 4.9 value score is not crazy far off our 5 value score mark. It's better than what Simons has given us. It's better technically than what SGA has given us, but that's a completely different story. Not quite up to snuff with these guys, but he's in a different price tier pretty dramatically. So at worst, he's a rotational piece. And he looks quite good on DraftKings, where, again, I would want him at least here and with the field, and if I can get above the field on that, I would. SGA is just tremendous. He's 11-5 on FanDuel. We got him 12% of the time. If you can carry more in your lineups, I encourage you to carry more in your lineups. Even though, Cleveland, it's going to be the same on both sides of this one. Even though Cleveland and OKC are both good defensive teams, we want to have a significant amount of this game. These are a big collection of the available stars or upper echelon players on this slate come from this game. This is going to be the most competitive game of the day, all the way down to the final whistle, most likely. So all the SGA you can carry on both sites is absolutely fine. We got him a lot more on DraftKings and closer to the field. 22%. He's a 5.11, 5.11 value score over there. He's only 10-5 on DraftKings. For a 1.55 per minute player, that is very, very cheap. 132 for 991, 122 for 85. Those are decent prices as well. But you've got, if you're looking for the most direct comparison, Cade for his 1.39, as good as Cade is, only 200 cheaper than SGA? I don't know about that. So, Shea feels cheap to me on DraftKings, and I would look to build a position, a plus position on that 22-25% public ownership. If I could take this north a little bit, I would. And that's probably where getting more Banton in conjunction with Jalen Williams comes into, I don't know why I emphasized it that way, in conjunction with Jalen Williams, probably helps you push more Shea. And keep in mind, again, just to put it, to continue mentioning it, this does not account for the Houston guards. Those guys are going to be filling some of these spaces in some percentages to this extent. Again, we're getting, we're going to be getting $7,300, $7,400, and $8,400, $8,100 Jalen Green and Amen Thompson accelerated. And then we're going to be putting some value on these two. I don't know exactly what it's going to look like yet. But keep in mind that those guys will float up the board. I don't know that they're going to be replacing the Banton shares necessarily. He's cheaper on DraftKings at 3, so we probably don't have to sweat it. They might get competitive around the edges of like that 4,000, but Lou Dort is going to be a better play and a better overall player with more secure minutes. Where it could get interesting is around like the Amir Coffees of the world as far as those cheapo Houston guys. And then the top-end Houston guys just would get competitive, maybe box some of these Simon shares out, maybe some of these Norman Powell shares at 73 is a competitive price with those guys. So bear in mind they're going to be dropping into the board. If you weren't here at the beginning of the show, that's because Fred VanVleet got ruled out right when we went live. Nuke DFS, cash without Keaton. Might be a prodigy. I love it. Good stuff, buddy. King of all trades is here. What's going on? Got any trades in mind, King? Anything coming up? It's hot stove season in the Fantasy Baseball League. I told you guys I made the first trade of the season the other day. Haven't announced it yet. Still shopping around for more opportunities. Looking forward to baseball, though. Yahoo Leagues are open, by the way. Oh, that reminds me. All right, multiple things. Yahoo Leagues are open for season long. I'm going to try and create some season long content for the site and throw it into the mix with everything else that is currently there for you for under $1 a day across the board at Roto Scouts. So check that out. And rip Bob Uecker. That sucked to wake up to that. Caught that like the first thing I saw when I pulled up the news today. I was like, man. Great baseball guy. Funny dude. If you don't know who I'm talking about, he was the Brewers announcer for years. He's Harry Doyle in the Major League movies. Just a great dude. So rip Bob Uecker. David Lynch, the filmmaker, also passed away today, unfortunately. Noble RD Entertainment's here. What's going on? 5 fire emojis back at you, buddy. Good to see you. So let's keep rolling through this. Cater SGH FanDuel. I assume that's SGA. SGA. We got Cade technically at 14%. If you reran this, I don't know that would come up exactly the same. And between the two, just on the raw scoring potential, well, I forgot about the price offset. Can I call it a tie? that $1,200 does make a difference. But you can see we got them at essentially the same exposure. My gut is SGA. Just on the per minute, like when everything else is tied and you're just looking at what's my cost versus what's my per minute mark, because they're getting essentially the same minutes. They're getting very similar exposures and exposures against the field. There's not one good argument point in our sim results, which then takes me just to the heads up on the talent level in is the 156 on a 5-game slate worth the $1,200 and worth the impact that $1,200 would have downstream. Do I have enough value to pay for it? And to me, the answer is immediately yes. So I would go Shea, but it's a whole lot closer on FanDuel. Just a bit outside. You tried for the corner and missed. Indians, no runs on one hit. One hit. That's all we got. One goddamn hit. You can't say goddamn on the air. It doesn't matter. Nobody's listening anyway. Just in the first scene on opening day, he's got the big bottle of Jack Daniels on the desk. Just pours himself a drink. So good. So good. Anyway. So, yeah, that FanDuel heads up is really, really close. If you come away with Cade, or if that 1200's buying you something critical, no issue with that pivot. Right? You're talking about a 4.75 value score on Shea for a 4.79 value score. You're talking about a 1.5 more exposure to Cade. So, it makes sense. I do think you can go that direction. I slightly prefer SGA. Shaden Sharp, Norm Powell out of that late game. Clips and Portland. I guess a lot of guys are coming up out of this one. 38% and under the field on Shaden Sharp. 44% level with the field on Norm Powell. 36% level with the field on James Harden. That's all on FanDuel. On DraftKings, again, these guys are owned in the mid-teens and everyone below the field in our top 150 lineups in our sim results. $6,200 Shaden Sharp, 18% hard undercut to the field. That's our biggest undercut among these guards. Or our biggest relative undercut. Let's see what his actual raw number is. On DraftKings, I am on DraftKings. So he's projected at the top end of Portland ownership individually. And we are not quite half, but definitely trending toward half. I think I'm all right with that. 0.92 per minute, 0.89 on FanDuel. It's just a better, I'm guessing, positional fit on the FanDuel slate to come away with that much of them. It must be what's going through that small forward spot on FanDuel. Right? Small forward shooting guard eligibility here. Point guard shooting guard here. Where we've got to have all this room for these guys. I feel like that's what's creating that difference because he's actually more expensive on the FanDuel slate. He is above our value threshold on FanDuel. He's just under it on DraftKings, technically. That's an interesting one across sites. That's also one that might get clipped by that Houston play, by the upper end Houston guys. I could see this coming down even further in exposure. This is not really a good spot on the Portland side of it. It's a much, much better spot on the Clippers side of it, just game-wise. It's one of the lower totals on the board, low 220s, if memory serves. I had it was early in the day. It was 219.5. I think the one I read off before was in the 220s. Clips strongly favored and the significantly better team. And Portland not really gaining anything, pace possessions-wise, where the Clippers do. So definitely I'm more interested in getting to the Clippers side of this. So I'm all right being a little bit below the field on the, or well below the field on the Sharp play here, and more gently below with a bunch of Shaden Sharp in my pocket on the FanDuel slate. If I could get out of a few more shares there for reasonable plays from up here, I probably would. Norm Powell, though, on the Clippers side of that, and Harden on the Clippers side of that are appealing guys. No Kawhi today, so Norm thrust back in. Not that Kawhi's playing full minutes yet, but we did see after we talked about it on yesterday's show, they did come out. Ty Lue before the game said Kawhi's going to play more minutes tonight without specifying. I took him up a little too high. I think I had him 26 or 28, and I think he played 24 or 25. But that was up from the 20 that we had been getting. And then we had, who was it? Man joined the rotation. KPJ was out, but now Man's questionable. KPJ, I think, is going to be back in. I've got him at 12, 16 minutes, something like that today. But should be some benefit on the upside for Norm Powell, and he's a much more appealing option just in a per minute sense than, say, Amir Coffey. We only got Coffey at 6% on FanDuel, 14% on DraftKings. He's only 3,300 on DK, but again, this might get squeezed a little bit by some of those Houston guys coming up the board, and you can definitely just take all the Banton shares you want instead of that. So I don't know how much coffee I really want. I mean, I want as much coffee as I can get, but not with a Y on it. I saw a funny Seinfeld bit. I guess it was on Tonight Show clip. Yeah, it was Tonight Show because it was talking to Fallon. And he's just talking about coffee, like how important coffee is to him. He's like, yeah, when it's all done, last thing that passes through your mind, people talking about it being your life flashing before your eyes. I think for me, it's just gonna be have some good coffee. And then just going on about how like coffee is the only person who's with you no matter what. Starts your day, yeah, you can go get them. You can do anything. Conquer the world. It's a funny bit. Obviously, Jerry Seinfeld delivers it a whole hell of a lot better than I do. Darren Fox, 8% owned on FanDuel for 89, 16% on DraftKings at 85. Like I said, I definitely want to get invested in some of these Sacramento guys, just given the absolute security of rock solid 35 plus minutes for basically the entire starting five. So Fox is looking like an appealing piece. I wish he was coming up a little bit more here. There's nothing I can do about that number, I don't think. I think we're maxed out on where I would want to take him. There's no justification for me to give him any more than what the model's giving him right here. So I'd be happy to have a few more shares and be, level with the field. I think he's a good enough player that being level with the field is fine. I would tend to rather have a position, but I don't really have a choice in the matter if I want to have a significant enough share. So with the field on FanDuel is fine. Happy to have my 16% on DraftKings, and I think you can safely be, in this trajectory from the field at a 5.16 value score. Coffee we touched on. Cade, we've talked about obliquely, but 14% on FanDuel at a 4.79 value score. A bigger undercut on the DraftKings slate is the same price across sites. Again, that's got more of an impact on DK because you're getting SGA for only 200 more. So very obviously going in that direction on the DraftKings slate. I think it's reasonable to be about here. Even a little bit lighter and a larger undercut to the field is justifiable. It is a good spot. It's just a 2-point game. Detroit's favored at home. Joker seems to like it. Maybe he's coming in here to warn us and hey, dummy, play Cade. I'm not saying don't go there. I don't think he looks bad by any stretch, but he's well below our value threshold at 4.98 on a day where we've got SGA at 5.11 and a whole lot of shares that need to get allocated to these guys. So the more you force Cade on DraftKings, I think the more you're boxing yourself out of some of the better value builds of the day. It's just not the correct path necessarily to have that salary for that production in that slot, where SGA you can get away with a little bit more. Tyus Jones, mix and match across sites. No real interest. Chris Murray, Nemhard, not really coming up like crazy on either site. Single-digit exposures on both. They're 0.84, 0.70, and 0.85 FanDuel, 0.87, 0.70, and 0.87 guys on DraftKings. So everybody's just solidly middle. Any one of those guys in a lineup or 2 or 5 as a replacement for guys of similar price from up here, just as a rotational piece, not as a full replacement. But in a couple of lineups, totally fine. That's where they come up with a handful of shares that we're seeing here. But none of those guys is a priority on either site. And that looks like it's going to be maintained throughout going down the board here. Darius Garland, I wouldn't mind a few additional shares at 75, but again, going to be facing a very challenging OKC defense. 4% exposed on DraftKings with a 5.03 value score on him at 7,500 point guard only, 75 point guard only on FanDuel. We got him a little bit more, 6%, a little bit closer to the field. But not a great looking spot for Garland. We just got to go on faith that Garland is very, very good. He's been playing at 1.18 this year on FanDuel, 1.23 on DraftKings. And again, guys like him might get impacted by what are going to be better looking, Jalen Green, and whoever the hell I'm thinking of play. Amin Thompson. Right, Amin at 84, maybe not, but Jalen Green at 73 is probably going to impact those $7,500 Darius Garland shares. On DraftKings, that's 75 versus 74. It's probably going to have an impact. It'll probably impact these Norm Powell shares as well. That's where it's going to get competitive again, is around these guys, not really around those guys. And that's where you want it. That's where you want to have those rotational shifts. Donovan Mitchell, just kind of in that same box as Garland at a higher price. But again, it's Donovan Mitchell. Never mind a few additional shares. But just not really coming through the sim correctly at those prices. And a little bit crunched on his rate today. Malik Monk mix and match. Malik Beasley mix and match. If you see Malik pop up, regardless of last name, maybe consider swapping it. But they're okay. Monk's giving you 1.04 per minute. He is one of the members of that Sacramento group that plays a ton of minutes. Got him at 34 today. The average is 31.2. He's the lower end of the 5. But as a mix and match piece, I think you can get there. Everybody else on this board, nobody really relevant to DraftKings. 6% of Amen right now, but that's again going to go up. Jordan Poole, no thanks. 5.3% exposed. I'm happy to give up every one of those shares to get to like any of these guys, but most specifically now, probably that's going to just sacrifice and go to the Jalen Green play. We'll see how that goes. Nobody else relevant down this way. Oh, Shepard. Again, if Halliburton doesn't go, which I expect we'll probably have soon, it is coming up on 5:15 already. All right, can you go lie down? Assuming he doesn't play, might see yet another competitive guard, $3,900, $3,700 Ben Shepard get a little bit more. But right now, over 28 minutes, he's really not competing. It was a 0.60 per minute guy. I don't think we need it, but it would be sitting there. Let's jump to forwards. And put centers on the board as well. It's just better to talk about it that way, I think. Come on. Good boy. Why are you panting? Go get water. I don't know what you're doing. It's a lot of sorts today. Beyond the Rabbit Hole said, Colt Scoot last game. All hail Scoot. Nice. How you like him today? Ball 1, ball 4, ball 8, ball 12, and Vaughn has walked the bases loaded. Then Clue Haywood hits the home run. Looked like a strike anyway. Tomlinson's going to need a visa to catch this one. When he's calling, what's his face game? Eddie's game? KY ball. Because he's got the Vaseline on his chest. It's one of the greatest movies of all time. All right, so again, if you weren't here earlier in the show, our first, I think, 100%er in our top 150 lineups out of the sim, I'm pretty sure have not seen that all season. 8.26 value on DraftKings, 6.74 on FanDuel for Jalen with a Y Williams. I give him 26. I'm giving him a little bit of faith in the minutes being there, but again, when there's no Hartenstein, so I think he's going to play as much as he can. It could be 24. I don't think it trends under 24, 22 in that range. Regardless of how, if you trim those minutes off or not, he would look about the same. If I had put him in here at 23, he probably wouldn't have landed in 100% of DraftKings lineups. He'd look more like he does on FanDuel, and it'd be maybe 75%, not 82% on the FanDuel outcome. Regardless, he is a absolutely critical value play today. So 1.08 per minute player on FanDuel in his minimal impact so far this year in 12 games, 13 minutes a night. 1.10 on DraftKings. In more exposure, 0.95 per minute last year. 21.7% rebounding assist rate so far, 14% rebounding rate so far this year, 56.3% true shooting. This is a good player that we're getting for free on DraftKings at a very minimal price on FanDuel today. That is as free as a free square gets. Center, util, either way on DK, you want a ton. Do you need to lock him in across 150 lineups? No, you do not. If you're at 75%, are you okay? Yeah, you are. Because again, especially against this ownership, I'm not naming it because I don't want to necessarily badmouth it directly. But again, they must be watching. His ownership has essentially doubled since this show started. I know they're not watching. And I have no impact whatsoever in the things that I say, influencing what the things that they're doing over there are. But I do find that funny. Yeah, that's a lot more appropriate. So we're essentially double the field now. And that'll tell you everything you need to know. KD, just as much as Devin Booker. Super appealing. FanDuel, we got him 9,700 both forward spots, 45% of the time in our top 150 lineups. Technically a little below the field. He was projected above 50% ownership in the projections that the sim ran against. He is a 5+ value scorer on FanDuel, but we've got a lot of those. And we need a little bit of room. So I think he's getting squeezed out of some shares there. If you get him 50, 55 on FanDuel, you're going to be with-ish around the field. Honestly, at 97, taking a little bit more is not overly problematic. There's plenty of value available to get there. I think you can get him in combination with other stars. Maybe it's at the expense of having the money to spend on like Sabonis as well. But between the two, I think I'd rather have a $9,700 Kevin Durant, even with the field there, than a 10-2 Domantas Sabonis. I do like that he's got power forward eligibility. I would want a lot of both of them. But that seems like a reasonable one where you could maybe come down some on this and put it directly into here and have 500 to work with. Kind of like that flexibility. On DraftKings for 9,200, which is honestly very, very low for Kevin Durant. Power forward and center eligible. 1.24 per minute. We got him 74% of the time. That's above the field, but it looks like they came up on him too. Let's see. Yep. Yeah, that came up. So the ownership numbers would have a bit of an impact here for some of these plays, right? That's how the sim's going to work. It's going to bounce off some of those ownerships as far as, relative value of those lineups that it's building and simming, but not for these top end plays. We would still get him that significantly. Where it would just look different is in how that arrow looks in the against the field number. But this 74, that arrow represents this 74 against, I think it was like 39, and now he's at closer to 50. So just bear that in mind when you're thinking about these numbers as far as their relativity to the field. Also bear in mind that we're going to have some Houston guys from here impacting things. Şengün, I will again check what happens with his rate. We might get a little bit of an uptick in projection from him with no Fred VanVleet out there. We got him 4% of the time at 8,900 on DraftKings, where he's looking pretty decent. Didn't get him at all at 9,000 on FanDuel. The way that some of those other guys were coming up, that kind of makes sense. But I expect we'll see a little bit of an uptick here for Cam Whitmore, who's a productive player, 1.03, 1.05 across sites. I only had him at 20 minutes, and he was coming up a little bit. 4% on FanDuel, nearly 5, 11% on DraftKings. He's above the value threshold already on DraftKings because he's only 3,700. Different kind of play on FanDuel. He needs those additional points to make value on FanDuel, where we're already there. So if he gets anything else here, he's going to start looking more and more important to the slate, and he might be the guy that ends up replacing some of those higher end guys, or at least some of the shares of them. Dylan Brooks is who he is. I doubt anything happens with the rate. Amen, we talked about already because he's got guard eligibility. And then the Jeff Green, Jayshawn Tate, Jock Landale thing. We also might have Steven Adams. I don't know what his status is. They didn't have an injury report out before the show started. But the critical, I think it's going to be Amen, Jalen Green, and Cam Whitmore are going to be three guys that you're going to want to keep your eye on in the projections update after the show. The other Jalen Williams, also very, very important on this slate. 8,500 both forward spots on FanDuel, nearly 40% of our lineups, essentially level with the field. He's just barely over our value threshold. He's just under it on DraftKings. He only fits in at power forward on DraftKings. Still got him 34% of the time. That's below the field. I think that's where we would want to be just because it's a position. If you came up level with the field at, call it 40%, so be it. I don't think it's bad or a mistake. And if you want more, I think he's good enough to take more. But all things being equal, I would want to have a position, and we are level with the field on a lot of the key plays of the day. So I think I'd leave that alone, have a little bit of an angle on it, but it is a very, very good player to be leaving on the table. 1.24 per minute. Sabonis, 33% level with the field on the DraftKings slate. I think I want my Sabonis shares, but thinking about what I was just saying there, it's difficult to go from here to here, but it's easy to go from there to there. So if you do want more Jalen, maybe it's at the expense of some of the Sabonis, and you just reverse the positions relative to the field, where you take Sabonis a little bit lighter than the field, and you kick Jalen Williams up for a cheaper price, and then that probably buys you, I don't know, more KD or more of SGA, whoever. I think that's how I would approach it if I was looking to make that decision. Right now, we're getting them in equal shares, but differently relative to the field. They're the exact same value score. So getting that same point per dollar value out of a 98 versus an $8,000 player. And yeah, they're different positions, but we've got util to work with. I don't mind that as an approach to those two specifically. Although, again, you could talk about it in the opposite direction where, all right, since we're level with the field on 33% here, let's build a plus position on that at the expense of taking a bigger minus position on this. But it's difficult to do that with an $1,800 salary deficit. Dort, we've talked about. At worst, he's a mix and match spot filler type on FanDuel. 30% on DraftKings, pretty significant. That is level with the field. I think he's just a good option. But we do have plenty of guys that are going to be rotating through that salary and positioning. $4,000 two spots later, both forward spots for Ryan Dunn. We got him 19% of the time. He's a 0.77 per minute player. There's not a lot of daylight between the per minute production, but you've got a much higher minutes ceiling, in my opinion, on Lou Dort. I've got him at 31, but in this hyper-competitive game between Cleveland and OKC, I could easily see him playing 4 to 5 more minutes than that. And even shorthanded, I don't know that that's necessarily going to be the situation for Ryan Dunn. So I don't think that's actually as competitive as it might look, and the sim's kind of reflecting that. On FanDuel, we did get Dunn 25% of the time. We've talked about Normie Powell, but again, 44% of him. Just 16% on DraftKings at 73. Derek Jones, yet another piece of mediocrity coming out of the Clippers. The only appealing spot on the Clippers right now, outside of just take what you get kind of shares and be below the field on everybody, is this Norm Powell on FanDuel spot from among these guys. And then Harden, looks good. Zubac looks like Zubac. But among these three guys, that's really the only appealing spot. And honestly, if the field's going to be there that heavy, I'd probably take a position and maybe make it a bit of a minus position. And 72, there's plenty to work with for other guys. I like Norm. I think we've been on that play for most of the year, but that's a lot of the field on a 5-gamer. Yo mama's fave, Siakam and Jarris Williams. Yeah, they should, Jarris Walker. They should both look okay at worst. Siakam more so. Only 8%, 5% across sites, 79, 72. He's a better option on DraftKings by a lot in terms of that price. But we really didn't get him, and he's probably just being squeezed out of some shares. Whoops. That wasn't what I wanted. I think he's just being squeezed out of some shares by the fact that we got 74% of KD filling some of those power forward spots. We've got 100% of Jalen Williams to distribute across center and util in lineups. We've got 34% of $8,000 the other Jalen Williams going through power forward. And then several guys in here with forward eligibility. I think he's just getting squeezed on shares, but there's no reason not to like Siakam. Again, assuming that Halliburton's not there. There's going to be plenty of upside for him in terms of just this massive void of usage and opportunity and everything that Halliburton does. And then Jarris Walker right now at a 12-minute projection, not looking overly impactful. Very, very cheap. Let's see what the news has brought us. Friday. Still haven't gotten any Indy news. So yeah, a spot to watch. The guys that I have flagged on Indy for upcoming changes. Because remember, we've got Neesmith questionable as well and projected. So Walker, Shepard, McConnell, all going to get little bits of uptick from where we're at now. The guy who interests me the most on a per minute scale is always going to be TJ McConnell out of that group. But with the assumption of a solid handful of additional minutes, or at least a few, played nearly 18 in their last game. He's averaged 18 or 17. So we've got more minutes available potentially for him. So yeah, would hit the board. Would he become critical? He's 32. I don't think so because we've got so many options in that price tier already. But I think he'd at least be playable, be a swappable value tier piece. Coffee's on the board. We went through him a little bit. He's right here. He's all right. 3,300. Certainly, you're not wrong in saying that he looks like good value in just the raw sense. In a vacuum, that is that $3,300 player with multi-position eligibility, way above our 5.5 value threshold that we're looking for. Absolutely. I've got him projected for 28 minutes. The issue with Amir Coffee is on a slate with an abundance of values from a lot of productive per minute players, I don't necessarily want the 0.68 per minute guy, the 0.66 per minute guy, the low usage guy. It's not unplayable, but I think there are better options, and there are better options at that price tier at 33. We've got a $3,000 guard on the board in Delano Benton, for one thing. That's only a 20-minute projection. The minutes are going to be shorter, but the rate is better. Does that get fragile and come out on the wash as a head-to-head? Sure. Could Amir Coffee win out more than 50% of the time in that head-to-head? Sure, could. And if you take, for every minute or point, whatever that you take away from Delano Banton, that gets worse and worse, obviously, very, very quickly. $3,300 Jalen, though, is an unbeatable value on this slate. So, yeah, in a vacuum, he's a good value, outside of the context of the immediate slate. In the context of the slate, he's at worst very, very playable, but would not be my first overall choice. We're talking about Amir Coffee. You had another question in there. Somebody did. Mamba did. Jordan Poole, I mentioned him when we were going through the guards. We were 5-6%, I think, Mamba. Yeah, 5% FanDuel, and didn't get him on DK. Probably comes down to how many minutes you're giving him. I don't know what you've got him at minutes wise. I've only got him at 32. If you give him, obviously 34, 35, he's going to look significantly better. I think he's playable, but the Washington side of that game isn't really where I'm going for any key plays. I think at best you're dealing with is who he is kind of spot on Jordan Poole. Washington. Hit the like and subscribe. Drop any question. You guys got questions. Doesn't all have to be Mamba and your mama and Doug. Doug's not here today. I haven't seen Doug. But we got all the regulars always ask questions. But anybody out there, feel free. That's what we're here for, and it makes the show more interesting. We'll get back to whatever's left on that forwards and centers board. But let me look at Jordan Poole here. So, situationally, about the reason that this game's appealing is almost entirely on the Phoenix side. Right? The 231 total, that's 121, or this is earlier in the day. But 231 with Phoenix favored by 11.5 it's 121 and a quarter implied points for Phoenix and 109.75 for Washington. Washington gains no pace or or upside here or possessions here. So it's really just a is who he is spot for Jordan Poole. So it would come down again. It would come down Mamba. If we're seeing a difference, it would probably come down to what you got on him for minutes. But again, as a is who he is play, can Jordan Poole find success in this spot? Sure. He's a productive enough fantasy player. He's never my favorite, but he's productive enough. When you finish up with centers, that's my second question. Finish up with algo updates. Jarrett Allen, best player on the slate today. Well, that's a good reason to get back into forwards and centers. Let's see. I know he wasn't at the top of the board. And I mean, the best player of today is Jalen with a Y. Williams. Full stop. He's literally right now the best play of the year on DraftKings. Right? This is the first guy that we've had come up in 100% of our top 150 in Sims. I'll go you one better. Let me see if I can do this. Across the top 500 lineups in that sim, Jalen with a Y came up in 98% of them. Handful of lineups where he didn't come up. But he is in most of these lineups. Again, 100% in our top 150. 98% of our top 500. That's your best play of the year so far. That's definitely your best play of the day. Is Jarrett Allen a good play today? I wouldn't say he's a bad play. I think it's another one you've identified as probably more of an is who he is kind of a spot. OKC, a little bit limited by the lack of a Hartenstein, but still very, very good. Still going to be competitive in the front court for him. At 7,400 on FanDuel, he looks more appealing. We got him 10% of the time, but we're below our value score there. Just 1% on DK, but he is a better value there. 5.24. That's not bad for 6,500. So in that run-up, that's kind of what I missed probably is the pop-out value there. So that's a very good player at 114 that you're getting a decent enough value play on. I think at worst on DraftKings, you're probably talking about a good rotational piece that could slide in for some of these $6,100 Kuzma shares. Absolutely. I would much rather have $6,500 Jarrett Allen than $6,100 Kyle Kuzma. No doubt about it. You could slide him in for these 6% of Ayton shares. I think that's perfectly fine. $7,200 Siakam. There's at worst a conversation to be had there about swapping some of those. $7,000 DeRozan. I'm happy to swap those. $7,300 Norm Powell. You could take a few of those. So, yeah, I think you could build a stronger position on your Jarrett Allen idea there at 65 on DraftKings. That's just a very good price for a very good player. It's not the top value of the day mathematically. Let's see where he's owned. Sub 10% ownership by the public. So it'd be very easy if you're just cherry picking a few shares from each of those guys that I just went through that are somewhat similarly priced across forward, center, and util. And you build your way up to 10, 12% on a play that looks good through your model. I don't want to sit here and talk you out of something that looks good in your numbers. You win quite a bit. Speaking directly to Mamba right now. So, yeah, I think you can build a position there that's justifiable based on the kind of commonality of a lot of those guys. But it would come with a little bit of hesitation around just that is a challenging game environment for everybody. I really don't like 20% of Siakam. Again, all the quality in that game is on the Phoenix side. 61, he's reasonable, but I mean, we're not even to a 5 value. I would take these shares and honestly toss them. Or not, I gotta watch what I say. I wouldn't toss them, but I would look to get further away, I think, from the field on that play. I don't really see the significant upside unless I'm missing something. What's his current? He's slightly more highly projected at the place where the ownership comes from. So maybe that's why we're seeing the field higher. On DraftKings, you don't really have to worry about it for 61. At power forward only, he's 8%. That's fine. And you're already undercutting the field pretty significantly. This is like where I'd like to be on FanDuel, I think. 8-10%. I don't think I need 20%. He's just not good. 0.92 per minute guy. 25.9% usage is fine on a 5-gamer. That's reasonably among the better usage numbers. But, as far as the value of that, maybe it's something that's just driving through one of those forward spots, like whoever that was that I mentioned that for before. Royce O'Neal, more appealing in my mind. 4,800, 24-minute projection. He's a matching 0.92 per minute player to Kuzma this year. Obviously, we're talking about guys who are very, very different historically. But right now, they're playing at the same level. Royce is way cheaper. He's projected for fewer minutes, but he's on the upside of that game. He's on the team that gains pace and possessions and everything in this game, the strongly favored team. 8%, same shares here. I think you get mix and match. I'm happier about having that position on Royce than having that position on Kuzma. Ayton's at worst a mix and match type center, 12% on FanDuel for 6,000, 6% on DraftKings. It's just, do you really want that 6% if it comes at the expense of a single one of those center shares? I wouldn't. It's just not the approach for building today. The ones where you are getting those center shares, and that applies to everybody who's center only, is still coming in conjunction, obviously, with these Jalen shares. So you're using the util spot on a center. Double Murray situation right here. Neither one looks all that appealing. 5% basically of both. $3,100 and $5,100 players. Obviously two very different things outside of their last names. Is different minutes projection. 2% of each on FanDuel. Neither guy looking overly appealing. If I had to pick one, I would go probably toward Keegan Murray, though. Take the security of minutes, even for the higher price. I don't mind the upside. You're talking about 0.74, 0.75 per minute, though. We've got so many more appealing options. You don't have to get overweight to Keegan Murray. Iguodaro's coming up a little bit. Again, just probably rising a little bit from the quality in that the Phoenix side of that Phoenix-Washington game. On DraftKings at 4%, we really don't need him. He's 3,700 over there. That is objectively a good value, 5.37 value score. Slightly below our 5.5 that we want, but a lot of these guys are. It's just so much is going through that you kind of don't have to worry. But that is at least in the mix for if you're looking to replace some of these and get away from some of those. Mistakenly, but if you're looking to do it, this is a reasonable option to consider for a few of those shares. Mobley 10%, 4% across sites. Everything I said about Jared Allen essentially applies to Mobley here. Just challenging. The other thing with Cleveland is all these starters, they're not like the Knicks and like Sacramento, in that all of these guys tend to play 31-32 rather than like 35-36, or in the Knicks case in an overtime game, 137 minutes or whatever Josh Hart played yesterday. So it's a little bit more difficult. Now, in a competitive game, especially if this is going down to the wire close, these guys will see full run. Treat it like a playoff game almost. So either Allen or Mobley, what I maybe don't want, and not because of, what's the right way to say that? Never mind. I was going to say what I maybe don't want is both of them, but that's not really correct. I'd be fine with it if it comes up. I just don't think it would come up on this slate. So when I say I wouldn't want it, it's more because I don't think it should, mathematically based on what we're looking at here, come up all that often. But if it did, I'd be okay with it. Hopefully that makes sense. Timmy Hardaway, we got a couple shares on FanDuel. I'm happy to leave those on the table. 4% on DraftKings for 4,100. It's such an unappealing play. I don't honestly see what justifies keeping Tim Hardaway in the fours at this point. He should be a $3,000 player on both sites, even with the increased minutes. It doesn't mean anything when he's putting up a half a fantasy point per minute. 35-4 the other day, 18 FanDuel points, right on pace with his 0.58 per minute. He was a better player, but he's no longer even this guy. I think he should be 3,500 on DraftKings. I think he should be 3,800 on FanDuel. And then he'd only be moderately appealing, and I'd be warning about the per minute numbers. Şengün, easy to play, but not really coming through in the numbers. If you get some shares of Şengün, though, on either site, you're okay, as long on DraftKings as it comes with Jalen Williams in the other position. On FanDuel, obviously, that can't happen. They're both center only. %, just hunting for some of these outlier guys down the board here. 17% of Koulibaly. Another dude from the Washington side of that game. I don't love it, but 57, it's functional. 0.84 per minute on basically average usage. It's all right. 55 on DraftKings, we get him 2%, fairly hard undercut to the field. I'm totally fine with that. 2% of Jalen Duren, same deal, fine. Undercut to the field. That's another guy, though, that, 5.4 value score. Another slate, another time, another place. We'd be talking about that as a very playable spot. It's almost at our value threshold. You've got $4,100 Mason Plumlee above our value threshold, barely coming up. Undercut to the field, gently, 3%. If you end up with 8% Mason Plumlee, are you making a mistake? No. The value's there. Do we need him? No. When I say do we need him, no, that does not rule out the possibility that after lock, right? After lock, all these things go away. After lock, everybody's essentially equal. So they're very. Does that mean that he can't outperform Jalen Williams on this slate? Absolutely not. But on this side of lock, do you need Mason Plumlee at 41? No, you do not. You can take him, though. I could see Alex Caruso maybe playing a couple additional minutes, just depending on the game flow here. Remember with Caruso, he's a very good player. He's a decent per minute guy for fantasy. He's a very good defender. 0.92 per minute last year, 0.97 in his limited action so far this year. They've just got a lot of this type of guy. So there's some ebb and flow to how those minutes might run, but it wouldn't totally shock me to see Caruso play a couple additional minutes. I don't think you need to chase it, but I do think he's playable enough if he lands in a lineup or two. Obi, with a little, he's another guy I didn't mention before from Indy, but I could see him kicking up to 20-ish minutes. Played 19.6 in the most recent game. The issue with Obi is he's always around a point per minute. 1.04 on the FanDuel scale, 1.04 on DraftKings this year. He was a 0.94 guy last year. Nobody on DraftKings going down the board here. 4% of Tobias, 8% of Dylan Brooks. Maybe he sees 2 minutes fall in his direction. Just in editing things, he's never going to look good from a per minute sense. But maybe he sees a minor uptick and gets himself to like 10. I'd rather have him here. I don't think I would budge on Dylan Brooks. But Amen, again, is going to go up the board a little bit. Shepard will climb the board a little bit as soon as we get that Indy news that we've known all day. Your mama's fave. I like his brother better. Thoughts on Osher? Get everybody back on the board here. Hazard didn't come up. Not on FanDuel anyway, 0%. He did come up. He's only 45 on DraftKings. I'll give him credit for that. Got him at a 507 value score. He did play 2 more minutes than what I've got him at. Nearly 3. 23 to 26. Let me reconsider that real quick. There's probably 2 minutes right there. That makes sense. He's going to look slightly better in the update. He's not going to be a critical play, but he's definitely playable, and he's going to be a little bit, he'll probably be like a 5.15 value type. Actually, I'll tell you exactly what he's going to be. Because he's not going to get kicked by rate, I don't think. Maybe I take one of those minutes away now, though. This is the game I play all through the early part of the day. How much credit does this guy get out of the model from the game environment? And then how much of a nudge do I need to give that? And then does that mean I need to take a minute away because it's going to look too strong against the price, and so on and so forth? It's endless. All right, so if I got a 24, correcting that rate looks a little bit better now. Oops. Give me something like that. 5.5 on the nose. How about that? He'll look a little bit better in the update. I shortchanged him by a minute, 2 minutes if you're not giving him the rate, a minute if you give him the rate. But I think his brother, again, is the better of the two players, and I think he's going to look better on the FanDuel slate in a couple of minutes because he's going to see a bit of a rate uptick I'm anticipating. I don't, off the top of my head, know what it is with no Freddie VanVleet out there, but I expect Amen's going to look a little bit better in a minute. He's a different price play dramatically on both sites, though. 8,100 on DraftKings. We did not get him earlier, but we're going to get more of him. On FanDuel, we were already getting 6% for 84, and we'll probably get some more than that. And yeah, the value, obviously the value on Ajer is going to be right here on DraftKings. And that will, again, when it goes up to 5.5, the only thing you're dealing with there is for every share of him that you take, you'll be forgoing shares of $4,200 Grayson Allen, which I'm honestly fine with. Yeah, it's just a matter of what values you're replacing. $4,000 Lou Dort, so on and so forth. So taking those positions down in exchange for a few shares of him is not terrible. That's a reasonable enough just differentiation play for some lineups. What you don't want to do is like across all of my lineups, I replaced most of those shares of these guys with Thompson. But in a few crucial lineups, in a few key lineups, or in a situation of I hand-built 5 lineups, could you replace any one of those guys with him in 2 of those lineups, or maybe 3? 3 would probably be pushing it, but 2? Yeah. Nuke, the highest overall exposure is Scoot on FanDuel at 93%, but I think your answer to your highest optimal guy would probably still be Jalen Williams. Right, 2 different questions. Right now what we're showing here is the exposure in our top 150 lineups as a portfolio, which I mentioned yesterday I think is the better way to talk about these things. But for the number of times that this guy appeared in the raw winning lineup in the 150,000 sims, I think it would be Jalen Williams, but they would be very close. And then like Sabonis would be in a bunch of those from the upper shelf. We would have a ton of Devin Booker and KD in those lineups. So you can always follow the path for that question, for the optimal question, via what the exposures look like. And then when there's like a crucial value guy, you can kind of rely on the idea that the value guy would beat out the higher price guy when it comes down to like pure optimal rate. And that's a no-brainer on DraftKings. It's Jalen. Mama saying, yeah, best team defending the paint versus only scoring in the paint player needs too much unless Shea goes for 70 plus. I don't know. I just don't see it, but thanks for the info. Which one are you talking about there, Mama? As you talk these things through, Mamba, you got to remember that actual scoring of buckets is only one of the ways that these guys accrue fantasy points. So when we're talking about, guys playing in the paint, rebounds count, Stocks count. So these guys you don't only want to focus on how they score their points. You don't only want to focus on what the opposing defense looks like. Are there very good rebounders that I'm assuming you're talking about the guys on OKC and Cleveland since you mentioned Shea? Are there very good rebounders on both sides in either direction? Yes. So that could get hyper competitive. Is OKC missing one of their best rebounders? Yes, but they've got guys that slot right into that spot. So I don't know which direction you were talking about that on. But if it was on the Jalen play, that's entirely just about the minutes against the price and against the rate. He's a demonstrably good player, even if he plays below last year's rate. For 3,300, he's just... I could take him to 18 fantasy points, and he'd be around our value threshold. That's how much leeway you've got there. You've got essentially 10 points of leeway just to make value. So, again, he is looking like the value play of the year right now, so far. Hardaway Jr. or Ryan Dunn? I'm going to say that's Ryan Dunn. I'll put them side by side and we can look at it, but for me, that'll be Ryan Dunn. Hardaway's like my least appealing player on essentially every slate just for how bad he is per minute. Yeah, that's significantly in Dunn's favor. And this is what I mean. This is why I'm saying Timmy should be in the threes. Look at the difference between these two players. It's bananas to have Ryan Dunn, as mediocre as Ryan Dunn might be. It's crazy that Tim Hardaway would be 100 more than him. 200 less is at least correct directionally on FanDuel, but Timmy should be lower. He's just not a good player. Thompson brothers in some lineups, yeah. As we were just saying, again, I think Amen's going to go up in the projections. If you don't see him climb, obviously you can move out of those spots, but I expect him to climb in our relative values when I rerun the Houston side of things or reproject it. But yeah, for this one, Dunn. Now, is Dunn my favorite player? Not by a long shot, but he's above our value threshold on DraftKings. The Phoenix side of that game is the very strong side of that game, so we want pieces from that Phoenix side, and at 4,000, filling both forward spots, it's at worst a very good rotational piece against some of the other values on the DraftKings slate. 25% on FanDuel and a tick above our value threshold, same deal as on DraftKings for 45. Small forward only kind of sucks, but it does seem like we're getting some of these key guys going through the small forward spot on FanDuel. Actually, I want to look at that. Do we just have like a shortage that's not really? And there's no good way of telling where these guys are falling though across everybody's got multi-position. I was hoping that would be a little bit more clear cut when I filtered it, but it's not. I'm really curious about why some of those are coming up like that. It's not a bad play, again, but I would expect them to be stronger over here. Anything else, guys? 5:56. We're coming up on the end of the show here. Smash the like button if you haven't already. Subscribe to the channel. Check out rotoscouts.com. I'm telling you guys, my goal is to keep money in your pocket and build your bankroll. We'll all build bankroll together and we'll all succeed together. That's why we talk these things out. That's why these shows, to me, this is a dialogue. This isn't a lecture, and that's why I prefer when you guys ask questions that we can talk about. But check out Roto Scouts. Everything is under $1 a day for access to all of it. And that's purposeful. Want to keep the value there for you guys. Yeah, when groceries cost 50% more than they used to and should. Got to find some value in life. Got to be able to tell the wife, hey, I'm not spending that much on DFS anymore. I found this great new site. Projections are just as good and it costs $1 a day. Less than $1 a day. $7. Less than $7 gets you from here to next Thursday. Gets you NFL this weekend for the playoff games. Every NBA main slate. Every NHL main slate from here to there. Baseball's coming soon. Let's see if I can figure out something for different sports. PGA, NASCAR, esports. Got a lot of smart people in the Discord talking about those different things. We've got our partners at acemind.io for our sim needs. Pretty good, powerful combination, our projections in their sim tools. Discord link is in the chat. I think that's it, guys. Unless there's another question that pops up in the next 30 seconds. Jump into the Discord for any more questions, ongoing chatter through the night. If you want to talk to my cat at 3 a.m, he's usually mashing on the keyboard. All kinds of stuff going on at Roto Scouts. I appreciate every single one of you guys, the subscribers, the people who just come and hang out for the shows, and everybody in between. If you're an active chatter, if you're quiet and you've never said a thing in here but you're here every day, if this is your first time here, everybody's appreciated. You guys absolutely rock. Good luck out there tonight. Somebody go win something. We'll see you tomorrow.